Okay, so Shashin and I have been um, doing this weekly thing for quite some time now, and we've
About
been
11 weeks.
thereabouts. Yes, so we've been going through various topics. I think, Masan, from like in terms of branding, how it impacts tech, how it impacts
Yeah,
entertainment, Sri Lanka, the world at large, and so on. So, in this sort of evolving way that we go about things,
yeah,
we thought we'll sort of shift a bit as well. Two is
yeah,
company. Three is hopefully a better crowd. So
yeah,
today, though, we thought we'll get someone. To be fair, full disclosure, he's a mutual friend of ours, a good friend of ours. But he's
yeah,
not here by virtue of the fact that he's a friend. He's here by
yeah,
virtue of the fact that the discussion that Shashin and I had required someone who has a perspective which is far much different to us from a practitioner's point of view. So we have let's call him the omnipresent, because I've been seeing a lot of him of late. Akash, who is a filmmaker, who is a lecturer, who is someone who's making waves not just here, but outside of the country as well.
yeah.
Akash, bro, thanks a lot for joining us today. Our first collab as well. So
Thank you
Yeah.
for having me.
good to collaborate with
Mm.
with an up and coming prolific
Uh,
filmmaker, someone who's
Sorry to have
qualified.
woken you up like super early, but.
Someone is qualified, someone who's qualified as well as a practitioner. And no, it's
For
not
sure.
early, it's like 8:30 when we do this every
It's
morning.
early by
It's early for
Russian
a filmmaker.
mind standards.
It's
Trust
late
me,
for
it's early for a
me.
filmmaker.
It's
It's
late for
quite
me,
early.
Macha.
It's very early. I'm probably gonna have to catch up on this.
This is the time they dream, bro. This is how you like
Ah,
it.
yes. This is where
I'm
inspiration comes from.
just for context. I'm the early bird here. What was the word that you used? Night owls. The other two are the
Mm.
night owls in this
Yeah,
conversation. But
yeah,
regardless, let's as always put our outline and put our context into place of what this discussion is. Um,
yeah,
this is actually stemming from something that Shashin brought up, and I
yeah.
think it's much better if he takes over and tells you all about it.
Yeah, so obviously, if you would not have clicked the video if you don't know what the Snyder Cut is. So the Snyder Cut, just to give a little brief introduction to it, Justice League was a movie that released in 2017, November, if I'm not mistaken, and it was directed by Zack Snyder. After the film was shot, they went on to do the post-production, and I think Zack showed his first cut of about 4 hours, like a runtime of 4 hours. He showed it to the studio, the executives and everybody in February, somewhere around February. And just after that, like an unfortunate life event happened to him and his family. So because of that, he couldn't continue working on the post production, so he stepped away. After he stepped away, the project was given to Josh Whedon, incredible writer, filmmaker. He's the one who did obviously Avengers for the Marvel Studios, so he seemed like a good fit for the role. But what happened was, because the studio didn't necessarily like that first cut that Zack showed, it was stemming from that same Batman v Superman's gritty sort of thematic elements. They wanted majority of the movie to be rewritten and reshot. And obviously we were all in the dark, and like everybody was in the dark, but they went on to shoot about 80% of the movie again and they reshot 80% of the movie. According to Zach, he still hasn't seen the cut that was released. But according to him, like we probably seen like 1/3 of what he has shot. So anyway, and then along the way, because of all the reshoots, they couldn't get the cast members properly. They've already gone for different movies, especially Henry Cavill, who was playing Superman. He had already grown a full-blown mustache for Mission Impossible movie that came out. So they had to get him back in, and Paramount Pictures said, you know what, you can't shave the mustache off. And then like the famous mustache gate happened, where the VFX artists had to spend about 20 to 30 million just erasing a mustache off, which was incredible. But all of this happened, and the movie released in 2017 ultimately, and it got critical. It was bashed from a critical and a financial, and from all the fans' perspective. It was just a flop of a movie because it just looked like it was done by two heads. Just a confusing movie and with bad VFX because they didn't have time to finish it. So just after the movie released, I think 5 days after the movie released, there was a petition on change.org to release the Snyder Cut, and that's how it started. And since then, now it's about 2.5 years. Since then, the Release the Snyder Cut movement has been extremely vocal on a lot of platforms, from YouTube, Twitter, Instagram, and they went on to collect money and give money to a charity on behalf of Release the Snyder Cut. They put up billboards on Times Square, which was, I'm guessing, a lot expensive. They had planes flying by Warner Brothers studio saying release the Snyder Cut. They called and they pestered the executives, like, to release the Snyder Cut. They, rampage the Twitter handle. So they did a lot of things, and I think serendipity, this year, just about 2.5 weeks ago from when we are shooting this video, but I'm guessing by the time it airs, it will be about 4 weeks. Zack Snyder came online for a Zoom documentary, like a director's documentary on Man of Steel, and he announced that HBO Max, which is HBO's streaming platform, is going to release the Snyder Cut finally. So and along with that, the question that comes around is, okay, what's next, right? I mean, for the first time during the cancel culture, a lot of bad things are happening. Directors are not getting what they want to do because the studios have taken over the power. Fans are really unhappy with the kind of movies that's coming in, especially in franchise basis. We have gotten something great. The fans have prevailed. The artists, the creatives have prevailed, right? Because they got what they wanted. And this guy, Zach, is finally getting to finish what he worked on for about 10, 11 months. So, I mean, the question to look at now is, where do we go next after the Zack Snyder? What does this mean in terms of the industry, in terms of the relationship between directors and studios, and what does it mean for directors choosing if they want to do a film with a streaming service or doing it with a theater? It feels like if you do a movie with a streaming service, you have a lot more control creatively. So those are the questions that we want to ask.
I think, Masang, in terms of like what you are suggesting also, there are many stakeholders, right? So
yes.
the reason why it's the three of us here today is also because the way we are looking at it, I think from Akash's perspective and from yours and from mine, it's wholly different to one another. So the nexus that's created between the three of us is, just for context, Shashin is a fan and a prolific one at that. In terms of the Snyder Cut, I have not.
Yes.
I know that I haven't heard the last of it, and I've kept on hearing about it for the past 2.5 years since this actually came about. Akash, on the other hand, is a practitioner. I think he has a very specific perspective on this as well, and he's someone who, as you will know, who has lived through it as well. But for me, and I must be sort of upfront about this, I'm indifferent to the concept and to this whole movement of the Snyder Cut. I'm just looking at it from the perspective of the money. The fact that what this means for the industry at large, because no matter how much we look at it creatively, Masang, at the end of the day, it comes to the bottom line, right? What sells, what works, what sort of the eyeballs will always be there. It's just a matter of
Yep.
where those eyeballs are pointing. That's the
Yep,
question
correct.
to be asked. But I think Akash, Masang, I mean, you went through this though, right? Like, because more than even us seeing it like vicariously, remotely, you were going through it as well. You saw it personally firsthand. Tell us a little bit, will you?
So, the Snyder Cut. There's every single time I step back into the States since 2017 was when the movie was released. if I'm not
2017 was
mistaken.
when the movie was released. Yeah.
Yeah. So every single time I step into the States since the release and since the whole Snyder Cut movement has started, I was mostly in San Diego Comic Cons around the San Diego area, and there were posters, flyers running around, like people just talking about it. Some people were just like not protesting, but
Yeah.
you can cosplay it to be protesters as well.
A bunch of
And they
people,
were-
yeah.
yeah, they had the boards up, release the Snyder Cut and everything. And we were camping kind of, waiting in line to get to Hall H one
Yeah.
night, and we kind of hear something flying about, and like we look up, and there's this plane with like a massive banner on its
Banner.
tail. Yeah, and we're trying to read what's on it, and after a few minutes, it took us a few minutes because it was like flying way up there. It's hashtag release the Snyder Cut,
Yeah.
which goes to show like fans actually went to the length of hiring a plane to pull
Yeah.
a massive banner over San Diego Comic Con
Yeah.
to get them to release this cut, to get
Yeah.
Warner Brothers to release it, and they're successful. I mean, in the States, it's massive. The Snyder Cut is it's actually been blown to mythical proportions, and now
Yeah.
we find out that the myth is real. So
Yeah.
I think it's amazing to look at it from a filmmaker's point of view, because here you have a filmmaker who wasn't really able to put out his initially conceived vision, and now due to the help of his fan base, he actually is getting that chance, that opportunity. So
Yeah.
and also the pandemic has helped in a certain way, I guess,
Yeah.
because streaming has become more and more prolific, and
Because you can't go to the theater.
it's
Yeah.
exactly. It's proving to be a very efficient way of consumption. So with all these streaming platforms coming up, I think HBO Max decided that, hey, it's a perfect time for us to draw some consumers our way, and decided to just go ahead with it. So
I think that brings out a good point though, Mashan. Because of the pandemic also, I think it's created this opportunity to do a lot of like A/B testing, so to speak, right? And streaming has become very prolific and like a lot of eyeballs on that platform. But I think this is just one metric of how they've been testing this out, because like for instance, I think a couple of months ago when this pandemic hit, one of the immediate drawbacks for the studios was the fact that like the theaters were closing down, there were public health issues, so you couldn't really do much launches. You had things like major franchises shifting their launches, like the Wonder Woman premiere was pushed, Fast and Furious franchise premiere was pushed, the Bond franchise premiere was pushed, and then you had this interesting situation where a major release like what is it called? Trolls World Tour, I think. So Trolls, they for the first time, and this has had the major backlash of other theaters as well. So what they did was they pretty much circumvented the usual path of a film distribution metric, where it's first the theaters, you have like a certain set of months that they get to run it, and then it goes into straight to DVD or Blu-ray in this case, or streaming or whatever. And you had like Trolls for the first time just subjugating that path and saying, you know what, we're just going to go with streaming, we're just going to launch it. And they had massive numbers. And you even had the execs saying, you know what, this is a viable option, we're going to try and do this for the next time as well. So I think it's a lot of good A/B testing happening. You have streaming services launching, and then they used, I think it's something that HBO did, was they catapulted themselves to the top of the pile by riding on the hype wave and said, you know what, you have this major group of people who are rich as well. If they can fly planes
Yeah.
above the studios and San Diego Comic Con, they're gonna go and subscribe to this and watch this. We need to have something
Yeah.
mega to launch it with. So it's more than really hype. Even it makes monetary sense, I feel, for the streaming services
Yeah.
in that sense.
And Shahid, like speaking of the rise of the streaming service, I feel like, and this is a question for Akash, right? Because he's a director. I feel like the type of movies that you would see on a streaming service and the type of movie that you see on the theater on the big screen has a distinct difference. At least now I feel like there is something. I would rather watch that on the theater, but I don't mind watching this on a streaming platform on my computer or my phone, right? Do you think going into the future, we might see from the directors that we have right now and the directors that are coming on board, like such as yourself, do you think people might have types of directors? There are directors who might make movies that are theater driven, and there might be type of directors who likes to make movies that adheres to the style of a streaming movie. For example, if you look at a movie like Extension, is that Extraction,
Yeah.
right? Produced by Russo brothers. Extraction movie went directly to Netflix, and then you have movies like Tenet that comes from Christopher Nolan. But there is a clear distinction of the quality of the cinematic experience, where you feel like, you know what, I don't need to watch this in a theater, I could just watch it on a streaming platform. But this one, I definitely want to watch it on a cinema. There's a class difference there. Do you think there will be different types of directors going into the future?
Here's the thing. I'm not exactly sure to say if there's going to be different types of directors, because a film is a film, and in my opinion, like films are meant to be experienced. But the way that you experience films, depending on the genre, depending on the story, depending on the concept, that changes. And I'm a big fan of the theatrical experience, because you go in there, you watch something on a big screen, nothing really beats that, you know. But at the end of the day, these films can't really run on theaters forever. They always have to move into the home theater basis. So every single film, no matter how big it is, with its Tenet or like whatever, Extraction, but whatever, it moves to the home video market. So what streaming platforms have basically done is they've bypassed the theater model, and they've directly brought films from the studios or whatever, from the creators back straight into the consumers plate.
Right.
Basically. So so many filmmakers, they were initially against it. I mean, I think weren't necessarily even accepting Netflix produced movies for the Oscars.
Yeah.
Times have changed.
Yes.
And so many filmmakers, they again didn't want to create movies who were vocal proponents of the cinema experience. But curiously enough, someone like Shavin's favorite, Michael Bay, once stated that he wouldn't really go into the streaming.
But he made Underground
option. Yes, he made Six Underground. And
Michael Bay has a lot of issues, but let's go into
money talks, Macha. Okay, so
exactly.
No, I think
Also,
that's the problem also, Macha. Just to apologize for interjecting, but see, a movie is not just a movie, though, right? For those of y'all who have been watching this weekly series, for instance, you would see something of a stalwart in these videos also, is that once in a while Shashin will pick up a mug that says Star Wars on it. So franchising is as much about the movie as it is, like, that's just the anchor point, I feel. Like, the film is just the anchor point. There you go, product placement right there. So everything around it, though, every film or a franchise creates an ecosystem around it. So what really makes sense is the return on that investment. Like, what sort of throughput are you getting out of it? Yes, from the creative perspective, a director might feel, you know what, this is like an awe-inspiring, like a Dunkirk scenario where I've spent a lot of time and effort And just the tech alone, just to give that awe-inspiring look and feel, where you can't have it from looking at it on your phone or your iPad or a smaller device. You need to have the theater experience for the sound, for the immersion, even for the crowd. But at the end of it, I think Shashin and I touched on this in a previous episode as well, where we were talking about whether kids or children born now will face a different reality in terms of the life that they live in. Like, it's not so interactive as before, and you're much more careful. And then Shashin brought a good point, saying, it's the new normal for them. It might not be the same way as it was for us, which is a fair assessment. So I feel we are talking about films also thinking of it in that way. We are thinking, okay, theater, this is the sort of the benchmark, and everything else is something new which might not be able to cater within that framing. But in reality, once you push people to a certain level and once people are comfortable enough with it, any change can happen basically. We might, for instance, see like a happy middle where, just like they've done Netflix in a way where it's a cinema, it's a personal cinema for everyone. You might have a situation where people start adopting and incorporating elements in their house that has their own personal cinema or mini theater for themselves, those who want to have that experience, rather than actually going out and watching a film on their own. I'm just spitballing here in that sense. But I think it's wrong to just consider a film for the film itself. There is a ecosystem around it that you have to consider, from the audience to the franchise as well.
Definitely, because it's not always about just the film itself. When you are creating a film, especially if it's a studio movie, there's so many other things that go into the thought process as well. Like, how are you gonna sell the toy line? How are you gonna merchandise this in every single other way? There's so much that the studio executives look at, whether it's Netflix, whether it's Warner Brothers, whatever. But when it comes to streaming, I would say it's I'm speaking from the creators end of things here. I would say it's like there's no better time to be alive for a creator, because suddenly you have all these streaming platforms coming up, and every single person wants original content.
Exactly.
So before, you would probably have to go through festivals, make a big break, get people to notice you, and then you probably get a studio offer, which is like a chance, like one in a million. But when it comes to streaming, and mind you, everything kind of started changing with the internet and technology. Everyone can create a film now. I mean, this is a walking studio right here. So technology has basically changed the game. How consumers or how basically amateur filmmakers can reach major studios, that has definitely changed as well. People like David F. Sandberg, the director of Shazam, Lights Out, he basically started making films and putting it up on YouTube. And people started noticing it. He built a fan base, and exactly. And Hollywood took notice, and now he's pretty much an A-list filmmaker.
Pretty much. He got to do a big studio film for Warner Brothers for a very hot property. What do you think? Now, for example, if you look at the theater experience, right? When it comes to theater experience, the studios have to invest a lot. For example, first of all, let's say the movie's budget. Right now, the movie's budget, if you're doing just an average sort of a film, let's say it's not a huge superhero or like a franchising movie, it's not a regular $60 million movie as well, maybe right in the middle, like $100 million movie, right? The budget is $100 million, but now they have to spend a certain amount of money for marketing, and they have to, after the movie comes out, now they have to spend a certain amount of money to have a home release, and etc. etc. So, and they have to spend a certain amount of money spending for theaters. They have to give, if you're putting your movie in China, then there's a certain amount of regulations that comes with that. Now, however, if now, because of the streaming services, now suddenly they have the opportunity to cut all of that, home release, money spent for theaters, all of that, right? They have just the movie, the budget for the movie, and put that stuff on the stream, and that's about it. Do you think that's going to make studios think differently going into the future? You know what, we don't really have to have this necessarily. What do you think? What do you guys think? Sharin or Akash? Either one.
Shavi?
Well, Akash is the practitioner, but what I can speak to as in
because this is a money aspect as well.
No, it is. I think what has happened is essentially diversification rather than because it's the same content, right? It's just the platform is different when you really think about it. There are different genres that can be explored now that you couldn't explore in the traditional model. I think something that has blown up is the doc series, right? The documentary series, which I personally am very fond of, because it creates a situation where you have the opportunity, and as Akash pointed out earlier, a documentary focuses less on theatrics and more on the story. So even if you don't have access to the tech as much as it being in something like a blockbuster, you have fantastic documentaries made on the lowest or shoestring almost, as I think Akash likes to call it, no budget at all. So I think for me, from a money perspective, Shashin, I don't think that there is not going to be I don't think it cuts across all of those other things though. You still need to have the same things, maybe not in the same yield as before.
To me, I feel like it's the headphone jack. To put it simply.
No, fair. Right? That's a fair assessment. Yeah. I agree with you. But what I'm trying to get at is, just as much as like for a director or a filmmaker, it's a 1 in a million opportunity in the traditional model. I think the same goes for creators who have to take a chance on non-named actors, people who don't really have a fan following, but still good in their talent and their ability to put them into things. Because I feel now, because of the streaming platform, that sort of mentality, people or the viewers are more forgiving towards looking at like a new up-and-comer, because they themselves mindset-wise feel like this is a new platform that we're using, this is a new technique that we are trying to adopt. So they're willing to give a chance to newer actors, newer directors, even newer genres, things that they would otherwise not really try out, because the theater model essentially works because it's a comfort zone, right? You make a day out of it, you go and like pay for a certain thing, you travel there, so you want to know that you're seeing something specific. Whereas you won't necessarily make that leap of faith for a very niche sort of a genre, which you can in the sense of like the streaming.
But don't you think, for example, so when you go to a theater, you know exactly what you're going to get. 2.5 hours, 2 hours, something that is very different from what you would see on the TV or computer on a regular basis. However, when you go to a streaming service, suddenly everything is the same for you, right? You might have a movie there, you might have a documentary there, but they might both have the same experience that you would get out of unlike you go to a theater. My question being, do you think, for example, because we have a mini series, right? Now, for example, if you look at HBO has, we had recently Chernobyl. If you look Chernobyl, that was like a 1 hour long mini series documentary.
It's not a documentary. It's more like a docudrama, but there's no documentary elements. It's like a narrative docudrama thing, but yeah.
4-5 episode run, but it looks, in terms of the quality of production, I think it's equivalent to a movie, right? And you have Game of Thrones that came out and finished off I don't know, last year, and the quality of production in the last couple of seasons is just phenomenal. It's just equivalent to the action scenes were just produced in the same equivalent, like the feel of that you would get out of a cinema, right?
Yeah.
And don't you think because of that, the requirement for a theater system might actually kind of get reduced over time, and like even like creators like Akash might not, and given the fact that the odds of you getting your project, your creatives out there on a streaming service is much more compared to a theater experience, do you think that they would be going towards that direction, and that might have a power shift in between studios and
Well, the short answer to
creatives?
that is yes, in the sense that I think of maybe last year, if I'm not mistaken, before this Oscar run, there was this Hollywood roundtable discussion for the first time they had with studio executives, and they brought
Oh, really? Okay.
they brought the major streaming executives as well: Amazon Prime, Netflix, and Hulu. They brought
That
these
must have been an
three.
interesting roundtable.
No, it's a no. What I expected, what
Yeah.
it's like an hour and a half long. But what I expected was to see tension. To be fair, right?
Yeah.
I wanted to see
Yeah.
this is a paradigm shift in the way distribution happens. People
Yeah.
have various opinions, but what I did see and what I didn't expect was how cordial and how each party wanted to work with each other. So, for example,
Right.
the Netflix executive, what he said was, we want to have the best of both worlds. We are offering 140, 150 million viewers to any studio that wants to come onto our platform and exclusively launch here. And then on the other hand, we also want credibility by having name-face directors, actors, and authorities in our platform. And a good example they suggested was Irishman, right? Where you have Martin Scorsese, who is a well-recognized and respected, not just a director from a fan or a viewer's or a moviegoer's perspective, but from studio and Hollywood at large as well. And you have this person who had been trying to get a film, like him and Robert De Niro had been trying to get this Irishman film off the ground for almost 2 decades, but there's insufficient interest and funding because they knew that it wouldn't have the same eyeballs to provide the return on investment in a traditional theater going model. So they waited for an opportunity. Netflix came and to quote unquote throw them a bunch of money and said, you know what, we are paying you not just because it is a fantastic film, but we are paying because you're Martin Scorsese. And we are paying so that you coming onto our platform is a win for us. And the eyeballs that will get this across to is a win for you as well. It will provide you with chump change to do more films like this. So I feel in the long run, Machang, to me, it's a win-win both ways. And I feel what the cinema will become relegated to at one point, and I think this is just natural succession, it's evolution. The cinema will be relegated to the same level as the traditional theater is now. It's a very niche, it's considered to be like the pedestal or the foundation of which you have good actors and the acting prowess developed. And then if you'd notice, for example, right, like major movie stars, what they tend to do is when they're off, they tend to sort of hone their technique in Broadway to get to a certain level. So I feel the cinema will be something like that for a filmmaker at one point, where you're creating a particular movie that resonates on film, and it's like technique as opposed to distribution. That's just my take on it.
What Shavin said is really interesting because, I mean, as fair as it sounds, when you take the numbers game and like the natural succession, how things might change, it's kind of in a way, you can see it going this way, but then again, no one saw how the world would change with pandemics like this. So what I feel is like you never really know where the entertainment industry is really going, because it's changing a lot with technology, and technology just changes in leaps and bounds every single year. So, and again, it's all about the numbers game too, return on investment, because everyone's looking to invest something and then, hopefully get a larger profit out of it. And to answer what the question Shashin had, I think it's more about, the risk and the payoff as well, because when it comes to something like streaming, you can invest quite a little bit, possibly a director who has been showing his stuff online on YouTube and no one actors, you can risk by investing a little, and hopefully if it pays off, you'll get quite a good profit. If not, it's still you can just let it go. So it's again, like Shavin said, it's you can test things out. So streaming has provided people with a perfect testing ground, I would say. But at the same time, you have people like Martin Scorsese, making movies that they've always wanted to make, and theaters or major studios, they haven't really uh, been too fond of projects like that because it's very risky. But then, people like Netflix, they're willing to throw some money at them. It's always about, okay, what might the audience dig? What would what good content can we get, and how can we actually earn the money? It's pretty much a numbers game, even in the entertainment industry.